How will the universe end? Mine, yours, and everybody's? That's today's big question. And my guest is Sarafina El-Badry Nance. Sarafina is an NSF Graduate Research Fellow, Astrophysics Ph.D. candidate, and Forbes 30 Under 30 Science 2022 honoree, specializing in supernova and cosmology. Sarafina spent time researching at the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard through an NSF-funded summer program, holds dual bachelor degrees in physics and in astronomy as the Dean's Honored Graduate from the University of Texas at Austin, completed a master's in astronomy at UC Berkeley, and is currently there working towards her Ph.D. Sarafina is also a passionate women's health advocate and science communicator, and of course, she is also the author of the new, honest, and empowering memoir, Starstruck, a memoir of astrophysics and finding light in the dark. Sarafina and I recorded this conversation back in 2021, and not only is it an all-time listener favorite and one of my favorites, well, the universe at large hasn't ended yet, even though it's felt that way, like it was coming sometimes. You can listen in to find out when and exactly how it will, but look, we've all been through a lot since then, and this conversation is still, and I think will remain, very evergreen. Because look, Sarafina's goal, one of her goals, which we get into here, is to measure the rate of the expansion of the universe as propelled by dark energy. And I'm sorry, if that isn't exciting enough for you, I don't know what to tell you. Welcome to Important, Not Important. My name is Quinn Emmett, and this is Science for People Who Give a Shit. In our weekly conversations, I take a deep dive with an incredible human like Sarafina, who's working on the front lines of the future to build a radically better today and tomorrow for everyone. Our mission with these conversations is to understand and unfuck the future. Our goal, to help you answer the question, what can I do? Our guest today is Sarafina Nance, and together we're going to get a little meta and have some fun, and we're going to talk about how the universe ends for each of us, for all of us, and if we can do anything to prepare for it or even prevent it. Sarafina, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure. If you could quickly for the people, tell us who you are and what it is you do.
Sure. So I am a graduate student in astrophysics at UC Berkeley. I do science communication. I'm a women's health advocate, and I write books. And yeah, I do a lot of things, all science related.
Anything else you want to add to that?
I host a TV show called Constellations on Seeker. It's about astronomy. I have a dog. His name is Comet. I'm a dog mom. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take it. That's fine. That's enough. I feel like that's enough. It's crazy. Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. Reminder to, I guess, you and everybody out there, we will ask some action-oriented questions, and then what we like to do is get into how our community can support what you got going on.
Great. Thank you so much.
Because we learned early on that folks, even the nerdiest, most invested folks, can only listen to, for example, like enough conversation about climate change before you want to close your eyes and like drive into traffic. So we finish with action steps that people can actually do something about, like specific data-driven stuff. And it
Great.
Helps the thing, but it also helps people feel a little better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So awesome. Sarafina, we like to start with one important question to start this fiasco. Sarafina, why are you vital to the survival of the species?
Whoa, that's a big question. Let's see.
Be bold.
I think it's really important to ask big questions that anchor us and our perspective in the context of the universe, so we can understand a little bit more about where we come from, how we got here, and, you know, whether we're alone, whether how we can sort of traverse the cosmos and explore the rest of the universe. So sort of these big questions that to me inform our humanity are really important to evolving as a species and retaining a semblance of humanity as we move forward.
I like it. That works. We'll take it.
A lot of words.
We're all done. That's perfect.
Cool.
You will never be faulted for a lot of words on this podcast. All I do is just ramble on, and my editor's like, God damn it, another one.
Yeah, cool. Glad I'm not alone.
So let's get into this thing. let's start by setting some context for folks. Sarafina, how is the actual universe going to end?
So the universe goes through different stages as it evolves. And towards the end, the fate of the universe is basically that it is going to continue expanding and accelerating that expansion forever. And at that point, so, we're hundreds of billions of years in the future, the space between each celestial object is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and stretch until you have isolated stars and you have isolated planets, and everything sort of cools and fades away until we're left to be plunged into darkness.
Sounds like my typical Friday. So that's hundreds of billions of years, which is good. That's helpful. Let's get a little more intimate with it. Talk to me about our galaxy. Is it correct we're going to run into Andromeda? Is that right? Or something like that?
Yes. Yeah. So there's going to be a collision of galaxies sometime in the future. And, it sounds sort of dramatic, and it can be, but it's basically that stars within our galaxy and stars within Andromeda's galaxy could be basically wrapped in each other's orbits and pull things apart or merge things together. So the shape of our galaxy will change.
Okay. And then at some point, our sun is going bye-bye, right? And that's a little bit sooner. What's the story there?
Yeah. So our sun is too small to explode as a supernova, but just big enough to basically swell as it gets older and older, and it'll become what we call a red giant, and basically consume all of the inner planets as it swells. So Earth will be set on fire and sort of gobbled up by the sun. And the sun will sort of get out to the orbit of Jupiter as it gets, swells to this red giant. And then it'll fade into what we call a white dwarf, which is sort of the cores of stars.
Gotcha. And what's the timing on that? Is that like Thursday or?
No, another, several billion years from now.
Okay. I just have to answer to my kids when they're just like, "Hey, this lady said everything's going to go boom." When is that happening?
Very far in the future.
Perfect. Okay, I feel like that gives us a little context for this thing. How old were you when you first started to kind of grasp all of this? I guess the line between becoming curious about how the stars and the galaxy and the universe works, and again, sort of grasping the timeline and how enormous these things are in the scales.
I think when I first remember asking those questions and thinking about scale, I was in kindergarten or first grade, so like 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, so I went to an Episcopalian school, and I remember learning about the concept of a God and hearing that God created the universe. And, I'm not religious, but at the time, that's what, I was told. Sure. And I remember asking my parents, well, if God created the universe, then who created God? And, sort of going on and on from that. And my parents, in great parenting fashion, I guess, just kind of looked at me and they were like, that's a good question. And so I was hooked. I was like, I have to learn more and think more and understand more about the scale of the universe. That's really exciting.
Does it scare you at all?
That's an interesting question. I remember the first time I was interning at an observatory in college, and I was talking to people about the composition of the universe and how we only know 4% or 5% of all matter in the universe, and how exciting that was. And people looked at me like I was an alien, and they were like, aren't you terrified that we don't know all of this? And my answer is that didn't even occur to me to be scared. Yeah. It was, to me, that is some of the most liberating, freeing thoughts of we know so little and there's so much yet to be explored. And as someone who I think is really curious and likes exploring, that's just so exciting to me.
Yeah, I feel like that makes sense. I like the use of liberating in the sense that it just goes like, it's a little bit like, have you been in an earthquake yet in your time in California?
I have, yes.
Look, hurricanes, terrifying, wildfires, cyclones, tornadoes, the whole thing, right? Scary stuff.
Yeah.
But when the ground moves, your fundamental assumptions about your sense of control in your life and in the world and just how the world naturally works really go out the window real fast, because our stupid lizard brains are really not down with the ground can become wavy for an undetermined period of time.
Yes.
Out of nowhere, and we still can't predict it. It's a tough one. But it's also a little bit, I imagine it's a little bit like being out at sea when the sea is really going apeshit and you're just going like, I'm very small. And I can understand in certain moments how that's terribly scary, especially if 40 footers are crashing overhead or you're in one of these earthquakes. But at the same time, with the scale of our solar system, the galaxy, the universe, and the time scales, I think that's probably where that liberating feeling comes in, because you're like, I'm not going to be here.
Yeah, exactly. I think, I struggle with anxiety, and I struggle with really feeling like I want to control my surroundings, because that, lowers my anxiety. And I think my love and passion for the universe and feeling so free when I think about the context of how small we are in the grand expanse of the cosmos, to me, that is sort of a perfect balm for my anxiety, because it reminds me that we are so small, we're transient, we're not going to be around for very long. And all of our problems, all of our struggles and pain and happiness is just a blip in the universe. And that, for me personally, is incredibly reassuring.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's funny. My children are very curious, and they're very lucky, very privileged that mom and dad can buy books and fill the house with things that help them quench that curiosity and stoke more of it. But they can also really overthink things. So it's the same thing when they're just like, well, sun's always going to be here. And I'm like, oh, actually, no, about 5 million years, the same thing. It just keeps growing. It takes us over. And they're just like, quick question. What? Like,
yeah.
and when? Like, because you said we're going to ice cream, but you also just said the sun's going to explode. Yeah. I'm going to need more detail, because their concept, and we know this about how they think. I mean, first of all, that their brains aren't fully developed, but also, to get more biological about it, they're how children perceive time versus how we perceive time, because it keeps going faster and the way we forget things, all that stuff. We keep pulling the thread and finding out all things we don't know. But, when you're just like, sun's going to explode, they're like, they only know how a week works because I have it on a whiteboard on the fridge. So 5 billion years, you can say it as some magical number, but they don't know what that means.
Right. Yeah, I think to some extent it's impossible to really understand these huge numbers. It's a billion years, 5 billion years, 10 billion years. Like, what does that really mean? We can't really, as humans, put that into any meaningful context that our brain can understand. But having something so big, it's like going out to mountains and you look up at this huge peak and you're like, wow, my brain cannot even wrap my mind around this sort of gargantuan scale that is right in front of me, but it's there.
Sure.
And so that perspective, even if we can't fully grasp what it means, is still, I think, to me, grounding and meaningful, even if I don't fully understand the difference between a million years, a billion years, 10 billion years. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, of being an astronomer, is having to deal with these gigantic numbers and scales that, we don't think about on a daily basis here on Earth. We think about what happens in the next minute or hour or 24 hours. If I have to think about things in a year, I have like an anxiety attack. I'm like, I can't process what's going to happen. But having sort of the big numbers anchor me helps a little bit with putting, my day to day into perspective.
I get that. I can see how it's this balm for anxiety as someone who also, again, whiteboards and to-do systems and jobs and kids. And I try to keep things organized. My wife, she just basically ignores me at this point with all of it, and understandably so. She's this guy. I'm just like the guy who lives there now. But this, I mean, because we are almost incapable of understanding the raw data of the time and the distances. First of all, just how big our own galaxy is, and then you're just like, oh, and there's a trillion more, or how big the universe is, or how it's going to grow. It's almost a self-awareness of our limitations, and then just letting go, right? And going, oh, I actually can't understand that. I can talk about it in this relative way, but that's a nice thing, because there's not a lot of other things, because all our lizard brain's doing, especially this past year, is trying to control all these things that we can't control, right? That are still, and we talk about this a lot here, like these externalities, like things that you are directly exposed to, whether it's your kids at school or your investments or your job or your family, whatever it is, that should feel like they are within your control. But it is nice to kind of look at these grander things or these pictures from Hubble or might be, and just go, okay.
Hey everyone, it's Quinn, your host and the founder of Important Not Important. I'd like to take a quick minute to tell you about the I or INI, whatever we're calling it these days, membership and community. It's a gathering place, really, for our most dedicated shit givers, a place to connect and learn from one another, and to have access to me outside of the newsletter and this podcast. We started it last year, and it's grown to hundreds of shit givers from all kinds, from around the globe. I'm talking about teachers and investors, students, electricians, journalists, artists, scientists, and policymakers, and more. Members get exclusive access to our daily news homepage, which is very cool, and to much more top-of-mind weekly articles, research, and tools that you can use and to stay ahead of the game, member-sourced action steps, twice monthly book and culture recommendations that have nothing to do with the end of the world, virtual events, and of course, the membership Slack channel. Look, so many people come to us asking, what can I do? And we think we do a pretty good job of answering that question and providing context for the answer. But the best answers and the best perspective really come from the community, a wide-ranging community. And we would love for you to be a part of it, to feel supported yourself, and to contribute to discussions and actions alike. And of course, by becoming a member, you're directly supporting our work here and ensuring that we get to keep doing it. So if you'd like to learn more, head to importantnotimportant.com. And if you're already a reader, you can just hit the upgrade button at the top. If you're not, go ahead and subscribe for free, and you'll see the option to become a member at whatever level works best for you. And as always, you can always find the link to become a member right in your show notes. So thanks for listening. And as always, thanks for giving a shit. Back to the show.
Yeah, I think letting go is really the key, and that's the important thing. And that's something that I struggle to do, in my day-to-day life. I try very hard to control what I can so that I feel like I am, worthy and succeeding and giving meaning back to people around me. But really, at some point I'm learning to fall deeper into myself rather than trying to deal with the externalities of things around me. Because by letting go of, we don't really have control. It's us acknowledging that we don't have control. That's the hard part. So that is something that I am currently working on in my day-to-day life.
Good luck. Let me know if you figure it out.
I will.
Please.
Yeah.
It's a struggle, man. And it gets hard, immensely harder and easier once and if kids show up into your life. It's this whole, what's the great quote? Having a kid is it's like having your heart walk around outside your body. And instantly you're like, you can't go outside here. You can't do this. You can't climb on this chair. You should do this.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're saying no all the time, but you have to tell them
these are basic safety things. Like, I'm sorry
Right.
you're frustrated, but I'm trying to keep you from being electrocuted. It's not so fun.
Yeah.
And then even in the bigger context of a year like this, we just had to explain to our kids, we're not going back to Los Angeles because mommy and daddy aren't fully vaccinated yet, and you won't be for a year, and this and flights and all this. And again, it's very difficult for them to grasp the enormity of it. But it's also, again, this moment of like, again, I try to keep both taking a step back to look at the whole picture, but then dialing into going like, can I control this thing? Yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
Can I control this thing? Yes or no?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I am struggling with that when I think back to this year, and, I'm fully vaccinated now, and I'm very, very lucky to be in that position. But when I grapple with sort of the pain and trauma and struggle that so many people have experienced this last year, it's really overwhelming. I mean, it's like really trying to understand a tsunami back as one person. And at some point it's too much. And so having to, when you look at the numbers of sort of the death toll and the number of people who have been infected, and, it's not really reflective of, it's a low bar for what is actually the real numbers are. It is really difficult to sit with that. And so, at some point, what I am doing is basically, and I don't know if this is the right or the wrong thing, but processing it in small bits instead of, the whole thing, because the whole thing is just, it's traumatizing. And there's like collective global trauma from this experience that I think everybody is just trying to process in their own way.
And then again, it's like, it's so interesting to take this grander solar system wide, galaxy wide perspective of, there's that great quote, which I'm going to mangle. Was it, oh gosh, I don't remember who it was. I think it was when they took maybe it was either the pale blue dot picture or the Earthrise picture. Maybe it was Carl Sagan who in his speech was something like, everything that's ever happened on that tiny little dot.
Yeah,
right?
It's Carl. Yeah.
And then I thought about, there's a great book came out a couple of years ago. George Clooney just made into a movie. The book was called Good Morning Midnight. Was the woman's name, the author? I can't remember. But it's great. And the movie was really good too. But essentially it's these two parallel stories. And it's this scientist in Antarctica working on some things. I don't want to give too much away. And also this mission in space that's on its way back to Earth. And something happens in the Antarctica research facility, and all the other scientists bail, and he decides to stay and finish up. Something's happening on Earth, like everybody go home. And then at the same time, the space mission loses contact with Earth. And it's so interesting when if you stop right there and think, they just turn off the communications, and none of the rest of the universe would have any idea that we had this plague or we nuked each other, whatever it is, like just get snuffed out that quick. And again, it gives you that perspective. Again, the broader perspective that you can either really try to wrestle with or try to come to terms with by letting go a little bit,
Yeah. And I think, here it's reflecting on sort of that story and Carl's quote, it gives you some, I think, appreciation for how fragile the Earth is and how fragile life is and how incredibly beautiful it is that we get to experience it, and that we are just so happen to be on this pale blue dot in the middle of an ocean of the universe. And I mean, it is both, helps to ground a little bit of these numbers, but it's also, when you think about how fragile life is, it makes it that much more painful to really try to conceptualize what's been going on.
Sure, but you hope it gives people, and this is why I feel like we should send everyone to space to just turn around and have a look at the thing, because it gives you this perspective of like, we've only been walking around on this thing for like 200,000 years. I mean, we are basically just above chimps still, and we could mess this whole thing up so fast. So fast, So they talk about, people go out and they have a look and they come back and they're like, oh shit, okay, got it. And, you wish you could plug that into everybody a little bit.
Yeah, the overview effect. There is this like I would give so much to be able to go up to space and be able to experience that. I read these accounts and it's just like, I think I have a small fraction of it. I because I try to think about the Earth
Sure.
and I try to think about the universe in that context, but it's still like, I'm sure it's just a very small fraction of what it actually feels like to be able to see the Earth.
Yeah, there's someone the other day was like, it was on some like kids website because I spent half my day on those. Like, what do astronauts do on the weekend? The astronauts like look through the fucking cupola and look at Earth because it's amazing. But what else are we gonna like? Are you kidding me? It's amazing, and you're like, yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah, I would be completely glued to the window.
100%.
Like it would be impossible for me to look anywhere else.
Yeah.
My job would be looking. Just that's
Great.
it.
Where's Sarafina? She's looking out the window again, man.
Yep.
Yeah, she hasn't done her treadmill today.
Nope.
So I want to talk about two sort of pivotal, to use a terrible sort of segue moments, ways your academic and your sort of own personal health universe could have gone in different directions. So, first one, in 2019, you gave this perfect tweet about not just failing a quantum physics exam, but getting a 0, which I thought only I did in college. So thank you.
Oh, you did that too? I'm glad to meet someone else.
Yeah, except mine were like, by the way, I'm like a pagan atheist too, but I was a religion major. So mine were like essays, 20 pages. They're like, your score is 0. I'm like, how's it 0? There's got to be something. Like, what are you talking about?
That's so painful.
But yours is something that matters. So,
No,
and also
matter,
you were incredibly brave and transparent about sharing it. But you finished the tweet by saying, put it here and we'll put it in the show notes. Now I'm in a top tier astrophysics Ph.D. program. Again, this was 2 years ago, and published 2 papers. STEM is hard for everyone. Grades don't mean you're not good enough to do it, which is so great. You didn't quit. Why didn't you quit? Because I imagine that moment was difficult. You're not some superhero who's like, it's fine. No, I got the next one.
Not. Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. And it's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, especially recently. And I think there's 2 parts to my answer. The first is, I love the cosmos. I really, despite all of the grades and despite all of the struggles with not being particularly good at physics or math, at least initially, I would have done anything really to be able to study the universe and to have the opportunity to learn more about it. So that was really the drive, the initial passion was there. And the second thing is this idea of what I call learned persistence. So throughout my life, I never felt like I particularly belonged in STEM or in physics. And, part of that is because I'm a woman, a brown woman, someone who is not, a genius savant who just kind of gets it. And so I felt really out of place. And because of these sort of implicit and explicit stereotypes and stereotype threats that underrepresented groups deal with when they are in atmospheres like STEM, we're told over and over that we don't belong, or it's implied that we don't belong. And, I've experienced that my whole life. And at some point, I've had small moments throughout my whole life where I had to decide, do I want to keep doing this or do I not want to? And it's easy to say, this hurts too much. This is too difficult. This is not something that I want to really have to expose myself to. But I almost by necessity learned that if I wanted to continue to pursue my love, I had to push through and say basically fuck it to the people telling me no and to the grades, and say I'm just going to keep trying because this is something that I love. And so at that moment when I got a 0, it really was another one of a string of reasons why I shouldn't do something. And I just said, well, I want to keep doing it. How can I make that happen? And I did. And so it wasn't, that tweet was really, I think so many people, especially women and especially people of color, feel like spaces like STEM are not for them. And so,
sure. Well, we do a terrible job of making room for you.
Exactly. And so I see, and I experience this of, wanting to leave at some point because it's too hard. It not because it's like you're not smart enough. It's because the environment is not conducive to your success. And So that tweet was really to help show that everybody struggles, and people, if you're passionate about something, we should make room for you, basically.
Sure.
So yeah, it's hard. I mean, I was not getting a 0 is like, Jesus Christ, like how bad can you possibly be at this?
Right.
That's really hard. But I went to my professor right afterwards and I was like, what the fuck? Like I got a 0. Do I drop the class? Like, do I retake this? I mean, do you think I'm an idiot? And
right.
He was basically like, no, it's all curved. Like you'll be fine. Just study for the final and I'm sure you'll be fine. And I was like, okay.
You're like, are you sure? Because I got a 0.
Yeah, like this is the big fat circle of 0.
Right.
There's no extra digits here.
When you say fine, like I got a 0.
Physics, right? You know math. But it was fine. I ended up getting, I think, a B in the class or a B plus, because everything in physics is curved, and I ended up doing pretty well.
Is that a pun?
Ayo.
Did you change anything after that? Your study habits, the way you thought about it, the way you looked at it, the way you operated within the space you had carved for yourself?
You know what? There are 2 things that I think grew to understand, and 3 things maybe grew to understand in college. The first is when I started college, when I started physics, I studied for literally like 20 hours a day. I mean, I was like, the more hours I put in, the better I will do on these tests. And so I didn't have a social life, didn't have any sort of like friendship group. I was in a sorority, but I never attended anything because I was like, I have to do well. And that did not translate to success at all. And that was a hard pill for me to swallow. I did not understand how more hours didn't correlate to better grades.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was the first thing. And the second thing was finding a community, finding people in my program who I could study with and who could explain things to me in different ways that I started to understand better. And I started to learn how to have a dialogue about physics. I mean, that is not something that I ever learned growing up. And at some point you learn to not just problem solve, on problem sets, but to actually discuss like how things fit together. And it doesn't have to be about formula. It can just be about ideas. And that was totally foreign to me. And it's a skill that I learned throughout college. And then probably the third thing is kind of going back to what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, is letting go a little bit and saying, I got a 0. I can let it, sort of totally destroy my self of, worth. Or I can just say, all right, that happened and better luck next time, and sort of, move on. And of course, I didn't do a perfect job of that, but I've learned how to fail, maybe,
sure.
is really a concise way of putting it.
And that's one of the greatest lessons of all, right? I mean, whether it's in school or some sort of sports or ballet or whatever it might be, winning is great, but man, learning how to lose, how to fail on your own, or especially with a team, and handling that well as a team and coming back the next day. I mean, those things, I have found that there's a pretty noticeable difference between folks who experienced that on the way up and folks that never really were in that situation, whether they didn't put themselves in that situation or their parents wouldn't let them fail for whatever reason. And because, boy, is that a skill that's necessary for literally the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's part of being human, right? There's ups and downs, there's successes and failures. And I think as much as failure hurts, and I fucking hate failing, I really hate it.
Sure.
But I think that's where a lot of growth happens, and it's uncomfortable, but in discomfort, you grow and you get to experience different parts of life and different parts of yourself that you wouldn't have been able to experience beforehand. So it's easy to talk about. It's easy to say those words. It's really hard to
be
deal
clear,
with
it sucks in the moment. Yeah,
it's terrible. It's awful, but it's also important.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there wasn't like one thing that I changed where I was like, I decided to approach physics in this way after that zero, but it really was this, it was, I let go a little bit and I said, I'm going to trust that I have a community of people that I can have these physics conversations with, and I can,
Sure.
start to sleep more and start to,
so weird,
eat on normal, like at normal hours, and just
right.
like, these things that go into making you, just sort of, general wellness, like how
Sure.
to just be a functioning human. And it worked out. And ironically, by the end of college, I mean, that was, I think, my junior year of college. And by the end, I mean, my trajectory in physics knowledge was exponential. So by the end, I was like, oh, I actually kind of get physics, or at least parts of physics. And
Sure.
I did the best the best that I had ever done in physics classes by my senior year. And it was because once I sort of got the foundation of physics and learned to start to learn how to think about things, the concepts just became a little bit easier to grasp.
Sure. And I guess there's a little letting go there as well, right? If 20 hours a day, I mean, this is not apples to apples, but if 20 hours a day and no social life and eating like a rabbit in random periods of time equals a zero. And again, that's not the baseline, but you can let go of that sense of I need to do everything I can to equal this, because it's not basic math. That's not the way these things work. To talk a little bit about some other math you did, you also very transparently shared your inheritance of the BRCA2 gene on top of a family history of pretty rough cancers. You chose to have a preemptive double mastectomy, knowing the probabilities, which from what I understand are pretty high, of developing breast and ovarian cancer, especially with the family history. Could you, I guess, to give some context for folks, and there's been some other stories about this as well. I know Angelina Jolie wrote that whole thing when she did it. But can you briefly describe for the folks at home, but especially the gentlemen out there, why women in your position, that conflicts of factors, elect to have a prophylactic surgery?
Yeah. My grandmother on my dad's side had ovarian cancer in her 50s and then had pancreatic cancer in her late 60s and died of pancreatic cancer. And at the time, we didn't know about genetic mutations, or we didn't know about BRCA. Maybe the science was out there, but we personally did not know about it.
Sure.
And so when I was 23, my dad was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of prostate cancer. So he was diagnosed at stage 4. And typically prostate cancer takes time.
Long time.
And it's typically very treatable.
In fact, I mean, they tell guys who get it in their like 70s and 80s, like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. And for him, he basically went from presumably healthy to stage 4 in like 6 months. So it was sort of a shocking, and it was, obviously really scary. My dad is my best friend. So there was a lot of pain there. And right after he was diagnosed, basically his oncologist and his team of doctors said, I think you should get genetic testing, because typically prostate cancer doesn't behave this way. Mm-hmm. And so he got genetic testing, came back positive for BRCA2. And right after he got his positive result, I decided to go get tested and came back positive, which for me means I have an 87% lifetime risk of breast cancer, which is to me, that's like, all right, well, then I'm going to get breast cancer in some way. It's not a guarantee, but it's very
but in a world where, I mean, we've especially seen this, this year, but humans, again, or lizard brains, like we're really bad with thinking in a probabilistic way. But when we have overwhelming odds, like, this vaccine will reduce your chance of getting it, again, loosely 90%. That's pretty big. And 87% is no joke.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then for ovarian cancer, it's like 30%, so it's still incredibly high, relative, especially to what it typically is, which I think it's like, I don't know, something quite low.
Something lower than 37%.
Or 12% or something. Yeah.
Sure.
So, after I got my positive test result, I, went through this period of, frankly, denial. I was 23 and my dad was sick and I was like, I can't think about my own stuff because I'm not able to. It's like my brain just could not comprehend that.
Sure.
And I didn't have to. I was very lucky in that I was young, I was healthy, I didn't have any symptoms or any sort of reasons why I needed to deal with it right at that moment. So I moved to Berkeley. I started grad school. In my first year of grad school, I think I was 25. You're supposed to start screening for breast cancer if you're BRCA2 at 25. So I went in to get my first MRI and it showed a spot and I freaked out. Yeah. I lost it. I went in for a biopsy, had to wait the full, week of checking my phone every 2 seconds and thinking, what if I have cancer? What if I have cancer at the same time my dad has cancer? How do I?
Sure.
I mean, it was too much. And it came back that it was benign, but they wanted to monitor it every 6 months. And I was like, absolutely, I can't do this. I cannot go through this every 6 months, especially when I know that I can get a preventive double mastectomy and not ever have to think about breast cancer again, hopefully.
Sure. Right.
So, I started doing a ton of research of, typical PhD student. It's like, what does the data say? What is the science? How do I get some control over this situation? And so I don't have any history in the medical world, but I started, I was on PubMed and I combed through papers after papers after papers. And I put together this 10-page list of studies. And I went to my oncologist and she was like, we can publish a peer review paper based on this. And I was like, great. But I was just like, I think I'm ready. I'm ready for this. And she was like, I agree. I think this is the right decision for you, which really helped. I mean, it was having a woman, having an oncologist who was a woman helped me feel like she understood a little bit about what I was going through. And she was able to, I think, empathize in a deeper way, perhaps, than I would have had if I had had a male doctor.
Sure. Can I just to pause right there?
Yeah.
So, when we go through life again, your dad's cancer, like you said, happened very quickly in a way that one usually does not. And yours, obviously, now with so much more genetic testing, more and more women are finding out about this, or people are finding out about ALS genes, whatever, we're finding out so much more, which can be harrowing and scary. And often we don't fully understand, both personally and scientifically, understand the implications of some of these newer things versus something like BRCA, where we have, like you said, 87%. I mean, we have a pretty good idea of what that means,
Yes.
Versus, again, some of this, and I've had ALS in my family, they're finding these new genes and they're like, listen, we think this is probably one of the more prominent buttons. We're not totally sure what it does, but it's very easy to send people spinning out. But when things happen or you discover information that's a little bit, trying to think of the best way to put this, out of the normal scope of how that condition or precondition happens, right? So yours is at 23, your dad's is early. It can be harder to find folks who can empathize in a really direct way, support groups of people who went through it at 23 years old or your dad's age or whatever. So you had this wonderful oncologist who was a woman who could obviously empathize much more than a man could, but was there anything else out there socially that you were found of folks who could help you talk you through that?
This was a hugely important part of my journey. Basically, right after I decided to move forward with my mastectomy, I found this group online on Instagram called the Breasties. And
amazing.
Yeah, fantastic name.
Fuck, that's great.
It's so good. It's so good. And they're completely organized around young people who are affected by hereditary reproductive cancers.
Mm-hmm.
So breast and ovarian cancer primarily. And so I found, two of my best friends from this group. One of them was diagnosed with breast cancer when she was 28, just starting business school at Yale, and basically had to defer business school and go do chemo for a year and have many surgeries. And, it's a completely different experience talking to young people and young women who are affected by this as compared to sort of when I thought of breast cancer before all of this, I thought of, sort of a 40, 50-year-old, which is still young, but, 40, 50-year-old woman who has a life, is established in, her own space. And, this was completely different. I felt like I was just starting. I'm just trying to figure out, what I'm doing and where I am and what I spend my time on. And suddenly I'm faced with sort of having to think about life or death and having to think about how to save my own life. And people in their 20s typically don't have to think about that.
No.
Thankfully, they don't have to ask those questions. And it was really challenging. It was really challenging to be, this was back when you could go out to bars and, when you could.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's a totally different universe. But I'd go out with some friends and I remember feeling like they were talking about, romance and guys and dating. And I was like, I feel like I can't understand anything of what you're saying because all I am thinking about is a mastectomy and, dying and cancer. And it's just like, it was two different worlds. And so to be able to find a community of people who are young, who understand what this feels like, it saved me, really. I mean, I never understood the idea of a support group. And the Breasties, and that's not how they brand themselves, but it really is like having a community. Having a community is so important.
Yeah.
Whether it's in physics, in STEM, or in this, I found it to be life-changing.
Mm-hmm. It can go a really long way, and it can be painful and really just can feel disassociative to have these people who would otherwise be your besties, your closest friends, the people who've listened to all of your other problems, your romance, whatever it might be,
right?
Who, to no fault of their own, simply cannot understand the moment you're in and the decisions, the information you're compiling and processing, and the decisions you have to make. And it's not their fault, but that's why finding groups like that can make just an enormous difference.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it was a journey to not feel betrayed a little bit by some of my friends, not former friends, but friends who I was friends with before this diagnosis, who couldn't really show up in the way that I really wanted them to.
Sure.
But that's to no fault of their own. It's just everybody is at a different place in their life. Everybody has different experiences and emotional capacities and, approach big problems and big, scary topics differently. And so it was really, again, invaluable to be able to find people who intimately understood what it was like, and not even just from our own journeys and our own diagnoses, but also having immediate family members, parents who were diagnosed. Some of them have died from cancer. And so having that sort of, parent-daughter, parent-son relationship is something obviously I understand in a very intimate way because I deal with that with my own dad and his cancer. And so that just adds another dynamic and another part that really strengthens those relationships.
It does. It's I have I haven't been faced personally in my own body with something like that. One of my best friends died of cancer very quickly about 10 years ago, and he was very young.
I'm so sorry.
Not. Thank you. I mean, grief changes over time for sure. It doesn't go away, but it changes a lot, especially when you have different perspectives and kids and life. But not anywhere near like your dad, but not dissimilar. He had a cancer that was mostly to this point, because of the society we built, it was esophageal cancer, the metastasized, but that's usually like over 65-year-old black men who've been smoking their whole life. That's the basic thing. And he was like a 29-year-old college soccer player, white guy, privileged, ran marathons, and he was, gone like that. But it is interesting how just that in itself can give you a lot of perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
But also, again, I was, when that happened, 25. And I mean, to be clear, like, especially guys in your 20s, you are, the best word is, I mean, you're basically a moron at that point, right? You're just like an emotionally, like stunted moron. And so
you said it on me.
I mean, I'll put it on a bumper sticker. I mean, that was me 1,000%. It's how I always feel like watching professional athletes and they yell at like, the 22-year-old point guard who went out to a club the night before a game. I'm like, I don't even remember 22. Like, what are you talking? Like, I can't fault that kid. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But anyways, it happened very early and it gives you a lot of perspective. And it's also really interesting to, in the moment, have the friends who show up ride or die, who don't understand. And they're like, I don't get it, but I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
And the ones who don't and the ones who can't, and it's not their fault. And you can have some antagonism about that in the moment. You can take a step back. Anyways, it's a wild journey and nobody should have to go through it, but kind of like getting a 0 on a test. It's terrible to say, but I'm sure you wish you didn't have a double mastectomy, and I wish my friend hadn't died, but I probably also wouldn't have moved to California to chase a girl and made 3 kids. And that's interesting, and you can certainly wrestle with that at times still, but it's interesting how that can kind of move us forward a bit.
Yeah. I think, I go to therapy every week, and one of the things that love therapy. But
the best.
One of the things that my therapist says that I'm learning is how we have only part of the picture, right? There's a big, even to the basically scale of the universe picture of what is out there. And we just our lizard brains cannot understand it, right? We have a very narrow perspective of our own lived experiences. That's how we translate everything. And that's how we derive meaning from the world around us. And, when I went through this, mastectomy, that's all I focused on. It was like, I have this thing and it's really scary. And then I'm done with it. And it's my whole identity. And, now I'm a year out and I'm able to start to, live life in not just that narrow view, right? Like I'm a scientist, I get to go hiking and I get to do all these other things that are not shaped entirely, at least by that diagnosis. But it's hard in the moment to be able to see that. It's hard to be able to see the context and there is so much that I am in a completely different place, both, as a human being, emotionally and professionally, than I was before my diagnosis. And part of that is, I never could have anticipated. It sounds so cliche, and I don't think I fully believe this, but it's not that I'm grateful that I have BRCA, and it's not that I'm grateful that I have my mastectomy, but I can treat it as this thing happened and it's part of life. And now I'm moving on to some new chapter, and it's informed by what happened to me. It's not good or bad. It just is. And I think that's a perspective that's really important, whether it's getting a 0 on an exam or having a mastectomy. It's like these really painful, terrible things happen. And it happens. And, there's another moment, there's another there's forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Universe keeps distancing itself no matter what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think about, my poor wife, we met literally at a Caribbean wedding over Jell-O shots. And
that's amazing.
We did long distance, and we had met. She was in LA and I was in New York working crazy hours. And I lived, my friend who died, like, lived with me for a little bit. And then he lived near my office. And so we drink and talk every night about what we're going to do. All of a sudden the guy is gone. And my poor wife,
Wow.
I mean, we had met like long distance. You've actually like met like 5 times in your life, especially if you didn't know each other before. And all of a sudden, like, this is not what she signed up for when she met like guy in board shorts at Caribbean wedding, But she was like, well, I'm going to show up because this is the kind of person I am. And it's been interesting. Again, I'm not thankful for it, but we are also aware in the universe of our relationship that,
right,
some relationships don't go through hard stuff for quite a while. And then you find out some shit, about how you guys handle things. And that was like the prequel to our relationship, was like literally the hardest thing, So I'm not thankful for it, but times I'm just like very aware that we can handle anything. And that's interesting.
Yeah. I have very similar, my boyfriend and I started dating, I think, what was it, like 6 months before I had my MRI. And then, within 9 months I had my first surgery, and he was like, it just so happened that this, this person was able to show up and be there in a way that was authentic to him and felt good. And obviously it was hard, but not every relationship could withstand that. And, it's interesting having to go through that pain and hardship at the very beginning of a relationship. And it either, in my opinion, either makes or breaks the relationship.
Yeah, fully.
And so, now we're, 3 years into our relationship, and it's like I feel like in some ways we're a 20-year-old couple, right? Because we've gone through, 20 years together. Because we've gone through so much, and not everybody goes through that at the very beginning, and that's okay.
Nor should everybody,
wish that
but
on
at the same time,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it is interesting how, again, it's like you see only part of the picture when you're in it, and broadening that perspective and broadening that picture and saying, like, nothing is inherently I think good or bad. I mean, that's a blanket statement, but like, for example, my dad diagnosed with terminal cancer, and now he says it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to him, because he lives a completely different life that he never would have lived beforehand. And he loves it. I mean, he practices yoga every day. He is on the beach. He, just has this completely different outlook towards life and his own meaning in life now, that he never could have accessed before his diagnosis. And so it's really interesting how people process trauma and derive meaning from it, and being able to just put one foot in front of the other, I think.
Yeah. Can we talk about constellations?
I would love to talk about constellations.
So I have essentially, I don't want to say like brainwashed is such a strong word that people use, but like, I basically force my children to watch Constellations and Emily's Wonder Lab, like, on repeat, I would say. And I mean, it's also like the happiest they are. They're just like, yeah, leave the room. I mean, they watch it makes them so happy, because it is just, there is so much between the two of you. It is so effervescent and so passionate and knowledgeable, of course. Why do you feel so uniquely suited to do that job?
First of all, my heart is bursting. That makes me so happy.
It's the greatest thing in the world.
So happy.
All I do is tweet Netflix all the day. Everyone's just like, renew Emily's Wonder Lab, fuckers. What are you doing?
That's incredible. Yeah, seriously, they need to renew that show. It's fantastic. Why do I feel uniquely suited? Oh God. I mean, I'm not, right? Like there are so many science communicators out there who are excellent, who are so good, so passionate, so excited about what they're doing, and they're knowledgeable. I feel like I got very lucky to be able to do the show. I'm one of many. There's a lot of really talented, wonderful people out there. I think, one of the things that I like to bring to every science communication that I do, and really everything I do, is I am authentically me. Like, I don't pretend to be anybody else because I get too much anxiety to try to pretend to be somebody else, I'm just going to be me. And if somebody doesn't like it, that sucks, but that's fine because, that's who I am. Sure. And, I think part of me being me is I fucking love space and I love talking about it. And I could talk to a wall about space. Like, I literally could talk to anything. And so that, it's like, sure, I'll talk to a camera, and whether one person watches it or, 5 million people, like, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's great, but like, I will talk to anybody about it. So, Constellations in particular was really fun because it was a unique show in that it didn't just talk about science. It talked about the cultural implications of science, which I really liked because science is inherently human. Sure. We are humans doing it. And so we need to talk about that.
They're inseparable. I mean, exactly. we used to punish humans for scientific theories and things like that. I mean, you can't take these things away. Exactly. And so I think trying to pretend that science is pure and true and separate from humans is an incomplete picture. Sure. So that's one of the things I love about the show. And I was very lucky to work with a team where I could help develop the episodes and the script. And so that was really cool because I was like, I want to do a whole episode on Betelgeuse. And they were like, great, let's do a whole episode on Betelgeuse. So, it's been really fun to be able to not just get to talk about astronomy, but get to choose what I talk about and spend, however long the episodes are, 8 minutes, but really that's a recording time of like 5 hours. Yeah. Getting to share my coolest, happiest, most exciting parts about the universe with people. And especially, part of it was, we're stuck in our homes right now. We are, trying to retain some semblance of life, when life is so different right now. And so, what can we do to experience the universe when we can't go into the lab or, we can't go to a telescope? And the cool thing is all you have to do is go outside to your backyard and look up at the night sky and it's right there. And so part of the show was to give people tools to be able to just walk outside and say, oh, well, I can, look at the Big Dipper and then go down a particular degree and say, oh, that's Saturn. That's really cool. People can start to access the sky in hopefully a little bit different way by watching this show. So that was really exciting for me. It's so rad. It's addictive and it makes you go like, shit, I want to know more about this, which is just like the greatest thing, whether you're an adult or a kid. I mean, we're in sort of this golden age of incredible kids entertainment, I guess we can call it in so many different ways, but I grew up on Sesame Street and all this stuff. And now you got Daniel Tiger and Emily's Wonder Lab and Constellations and all this stuff. You got Muppets and Snoopy and Space. I mean, it's amazing. But there's also just, there's the lazy versions of, and my kids are so sheltered. They think like blueberries are dessert and that like your show is the only thing on TV.
That makes me happy.
And I put them to bed like 7:00. They're like, the sun's out.
Yeah.
Sorry. Don't have, their friends are up till 9 eating sugar.
Exactly.
But great. So the point is like, it's easy when you're exhausted to be the parent who's just like put on Frozen again and like go out of the room. By the way, Frozen's amazing, but it's amazing to have something like this where you could be talking to them about anything and they are into it because of the energy you bring to it, which is so rad.
That is incredibly nice of you to say. I'm flattered.
No. I mean, they would kill me if I didn't talk to you at this point. I don't get to make decisions anymore.
Well, thank you.
So your history, your stories of academic setbacks, if that's what we're calling a zero now, which I wish that's how I could have framed it in college. It's a setback instead of my parents being like, what the fuck? These setbacks, taking this very mature preventative action against cancer it seems like we've talked about these common themes, which are interesting. I've kind of honed in on this sentence the past year, especially, of all you can do is all you can do, right? Which is both letting go, but also like putting whatever you can into the things that you can do.
Right.
So you've learned to let go of some things, but also you fought like hell for your place in this world as a brown woman who was immediately judged by your look and your body, which you've had to change. You weren't accepted in this specific world you wanted to be in, this part of the ever expanding universe, right?
Yeah.
But this part you have carved like means so much to not just kids, but to you, and I am assuming to so many other women and young brown women in academia and elsewhere. Where again, bouncing back for like how the universe is gonna die and the sky's gonna go dark versus like your biology. We're all, what did Carl say, stardust.
Yeah.
But you are taking up a lot of room, which is awesome. So I wonder if everything sort of we've talked about and you've learned, like, what lessons can you share about how to reconcile sort of this inevitable end of the universe and letting go of that and making the most of our, what can be very brief time here?
Yeah, I love the way you frame that. One thing I talk about when I talk about science communication, or when I talk about mentorship and encouraging people to enter STEM if that's what they want, or
Sure.
do whatever they want, is to find something you're passionate about, and don't let anybody tell you that you're not good enough to do it, or that you don't belong in that space, because nobody gets to say whether you are good enough for something other than you. Like, you get to choose what you want to do. And obviously, all of that is couched in there's systemic oppression, there's systemic racism, right? There is systemic homophobia and transphobia, and a lot of especially marginalized people. That's an incredibly difficult thing to do. It's incredibly difficult to say I'm passionate about something and I'm just gonna keep following that no matter what, because it's very painful, and oftentimes it's impossible. But I think finding something that you love and that you're passionate about is at least the very first step. To me, finding a community is hugely important. Finding a community in whatever intersection of your identity you feel speaks to you is incredibly powerful, because those people can support and validate and lift you up and help give you space to have a voice. And yeah, I think those are the two most important like action items, I would say. And finally, like, this is a little bit broader, but I think remembering how small we are, remembering how everything changes, everything is transient. We really don't have control over the universe, right? But because of that, we get to play and explore and find purpose, and not to take ourselves too seriously, right? Like,
Sure.
We're just human beings trying to make our way through the world, and that's okay. That's what keeps me sane, I think, when I get so bogged down in whatever research problem I'm facing or whatever health problem I'm facing. It's, taking a step back and finding myself reassured by the perspective of the universe.
Sure.
That's what I think fuels me and keeps me going.
I love that. Nitty gritty, are there any specific organizations or causes that you believe in or you support where folks could give attention or time or money to support whatever they're doing, whatever you're doing? We like to really be specific with folks so they can just mash their button against the play button or the donate button or whatever it might be and feel like they're doing something.
I love that. I think the two organizations I already talked about the Breasties. They're a nonprofit, highly recommend.
Greatest name ever.
Yeah. Highly recommend their organization. And the other one is Girls Who Code. They're fantastic. And I think especially for girls and for young girls of color, it's really important. So both of those I'm really passionate about.
Awesome. Well, we will
Yeah.
definitely put those in the show notes. Okay, last couple questions, and I'm going to let you get out of here because it's been like your entire day here. Like the sun has changed from your window.
I'm like it glared.
Sorry, Jesus.
No, it's great. I love it.
You're so kind to spend the time. So, Sarafina, when was the first time in your life you realized you had the power of change or the power to do something meaningful?
I think I was like 12. I'd just gone to science camp, and this astronomer who came to visit told me I couldn't be an astronomer. And I was like 11 and I was like, fuck you, I'm going to be an astronomer.
Do you have this guy's like social security number or address?
Dude,
or
I know.
anything?
I need to look him up. I need to be like, excuse me, sir.
Jesus.
I just want to let you know.
Uh-huh.
I'm an astrophysicist now.
Yeah.
You can go
Yeah.
fuck yourself.
Yeah.
No. That was probably, that was the first time when I conceptualized, maybe people don't think I can do this thing and don't want me to do this thing. And also I want to do it. So I'm going to do it.
I love it. Who is someone in your life that's positively impacted your work in the past 6 months?
Not my dog.
I mean, look, we can say, we talked about the dogs. It can 100% be your dogs. Comet's amazing.
He is amazing. He helps me more than he knows. I would probably say Emily Calandrelli. Yeah. She, I looked up to her for so long, and we've become friends over the last year. We met almost exactly a year ago. And it's been challenging finding women in this space who, no pun intended, who have the same, dreams and passions and way of communicating and total unequivocal support.
Mm-hmm.
There's no jealousy or bitterness or trying to tear each other down. It really is just like comes from a place of love and support and elevating people. And Emily is just fantastic at that. So it's been really cool to get to know her and have someone, as a friend and someone to look up to. She's really, I think, making the world a better place and making my life better. So I'm very lucky.
We'll take it. Sarafina, what's your self-care? What are you doing these days?
I do yoga every day.
Okay.
I sleep at 10 p.m. every night.
Awesome.
And I go on, we live right by a forest. So I get to go on walks in the forest with Comet,
Amazing.
Almost every day. So yeah, I think really taking time for me, I never did that growing up. In a conscious way, and claiming that time for myself has been so important.
I love that. Yeah. I'm so down with the forest bathing thing that they talk about. It's the greatest.
It's lovely.
That's exactly how Los Angeles feels. I'm kidding. It's not at all. It's a disaster.
Yeah. Not sure about that.
What is a book that you read this year that has either opened your mind to something you hadn't considered before, something new to you, or has changed your thinking in some way? And we've got a whole list we put on Bookshop, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. I would say Untamed by Glennon Doyle.
Okay.
It is this book about, I think the line is be the cheetah. So
amazing.
Yeah, it's really, sort of unabashedly claiming, who you are and not letting yourself be trapped or encumbered by societal norms or expectations and being fully authentically yourself. I love her writing, and I derive a lot of meaning from sort of her own personal journey. So highly recommend.
Rock and roll. That'll go on there. Sarafina, where can our community follow you on the internet?
Yeah, I am on all social. I don't know what all the social platforms
There's
are.
Too
actually,
many. It's too much.
I don't know why I said that. I'm on two. I am on Twitter and Instagram at Starstruck SF. Yeah, so find me there.
Okay, rock and roll. Where can they find Constellations?
It is on all Seeker platforms, on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. I don't know if there are more, but those are the big ones.
Okay.
And just look up Constellations, and there will be all 8 episodes of the first season.
Amazing. Thank you.
for sharing
Thank
all this
you.
and for all of your time. It's been 4 hours, so I apologize.
It's been a whole day.
It's been a whole day. Everything's over. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it for everything you're doing, for
Thank
sharing with
you.
us, and
This was
for
great.
all of your bravery and transparency about your journey. It's pretty awesome, and it makes, I think, the journey probably a little easier for some folks, which is great.
Thanks, Quinn. I appreciate that. Thanks for all the great questions. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course.